maximizing on the multi-channel approach. That's a big thing. Again, thanks to the Salesforge that you guys have this option. We see that a simple flow, instead of running, for example, 3-4 emails, if you run 2 emails and then you send 2 LinkedIn messages, this works like magic for the majority of clients. If people are able to look at you from different platforms, from different angles, they are much more, let's say, able to convert.
But what are the top 3 typical mistakes that founders of sales teams make?
The cold email infrastructure. They don't know how to set it up correctly, how to take care of it. Second is more about the offer. They have a great product, but they just don't know how to make good offers.
Okay.
That's a big problem. And the third one, I would say the management conversion part. They don't reply to the messages quite quickly. They don't have a setup process on how we turn a cold prospect into a booked meeting, and then from the booked meeting into the closed deal.
If a company today does not do outbound, and a lot of companies don't do outbound, do you believe that every B2B company should do outbound maybe?
At some point, you definitely want to run outbound, yes. If you have really ambitious goals, which you think like you cannot achieve by just doing the referrals or inbound or ads, outbound is definitely something which can help you a lot.
Hello, so today we're going to talk to Filip Starchak, one of the best GTM engineers around the world. We're going to talk about his journey, how he became a GTM engineer. We're going to talk about various GTM strategies and why outbound isn't dead. Filip, welcome to the show, I guess. So yeah, we're good if you introduce yourself, how do you get to the point that you are? And then I guess I'm going to have a bunch of other questions for you.
Amazing. First of all, thank you, Frank, for the opportunity to have this nice, as I hope, conversation together. And first of all, what I wanted to talk about, of course, maybe slightly about my journey and how I ended up with all of this go-to-market, cold email, and all these beautiful things, right? Which all of the B2B businesses seem to need. So basically, I started my journey when I was 17 years old. I really wanted to get into online business, and basically what I did, I bought a course which was around more Facebook ads, and basically I started going deeper into that direction. And in 5 or 6 months after getting a couple of clients and burning for them, I identified it's not really something which I love doing. And so I was thinking I love acquisition, I love talking to people. Are there any other ways where I could help the businesses? And that's pretty much how I opened cold email for myself. And at that time, it seemed like a really something which is very difficult, and it seemed like something from a different planet. Even though right now I understand it's, I would say, mostly science, and there are some rules which you kind of have to follow. And so basically, I started again selling cold email as a service. I ran my own agency. Then I joined a couple of other agencies which were focused on clay and selling cold email as the service. I used to work there mostly as a salesman. So account executive, I was generating the whole pipeline for myself by, of course, leveraging cold email. And that's how I learned a lot of, let's say, fundamentals and basics, which helped me further. Around 6 to 7 months ago, I started doing something which we were selling before. So basically, I started doing more of the cold email backend stuff for the clients. So instead of selling the service, I started fulfilling the service. And this is what I'm doing currently at Strongest Group. So I'm doing the GTM for, I would say, top B2B companies, tech companies, SaaS companies from Scandinavia, which want to kind of scale their operations across the Europe and North America. And also some of the other companies from the US, for example. We have a couple of clients which want to enter the Europe as a market. So that's what I do on a daily basis.
Gotcha. So as a founder myself, I always have this question, how do you look at the difference between Scandinavia and the US? What are the similarities or the differences that you're seeing?
I would say you would never guess that Scandinavians are pretty ambitious people, because we think that the let's say level at which they are right now, I mean life-wise, it's pretty high, and so they can think about themselves as like very, I don't know, chill people. They don't have to stress that much. They have a lot of money. I mean, the government is taking care of them. However, I've noticed that over the last 2 to 3 years, they started getting super ambitious, like on the level which is not seen anywhere else in Europe, I would say. So the ambition, I would say, is getting on the level of the US, meaning that people try to work longer hours. They really love, let's say, hustling. We can we can use this word, fancy word. They also really try to go as hard as possible in regards to scaling their business. They try to be more aggressive, and so this results in more companies getting funding from other, let's say, VCs, not only in the, let's say, Finland or Norway or Sweden or Denmark, but also a lot of companies are getting into YC. So this gives me a good idea of where this market as a whole, to which direction it's going right now.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen naturally the companies like Lovable and Legora and a bunch of other companies popping up. So, you know, we are seeing definitely Europe or maybe Scandinavia in particular, you know, rising again. Naturally, there's other success stories there like Spotify and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
But yeah, you know, I think when I speak to folks in Scandinavia, I'm not sure, it doesn't always strike me as they're the ones really that are super ambitious. I mean, you do see these examples, but I know when I speak to let's call it an average tech founder, it doesn't typically strike me. But maybe I haven't met the right ones. So yeah, interesting. So maybe let's dive deeper a bit into your kind of journey. So in terms of kind of GTM engineering, I guess you know, one question is what drives you? Why do you decide to go from a kind of from sales and selling that actually serves? Why do you went into fulfillment itself?
Yeah, of course. We had a lot of private conversations with you, Frank, and in one of those you mentioned that when you get to talk to other people who are in sales or in general, when you are taking sales calls, it's like a dopamine hit for you. The same goes to me when I see that we launch campaigns for the clients and they start performing. We open the Slack channel where we have all of the positive replies, and every single day, new positive replies, new leads, they come into those channels. So this is something I really enjoy seeing. And also the whole process, like reverse engineering how to do it. This is something which is very interesting to me.
Yeah, we have one of those channels as well, like where all the replies come in and then you just look at them. And the other channel, naturally, that is quite frequent in our case is what we call the baking channel. This is where all the payments go in from customers.
Exactly.
But naturally, GTM engineering has been around for what, like two years or so. The closest thing to that was revenue operations, sales operations, and that naturally still exists. What is your take on how you perceive, I guess, GTM engineering versus revenue operations?
Yeah. For me, I would say the biggest difference between those two is definitely it lies in the, let's say, the source on how you generate the pipeline. So I would say GTM is focused more on like net new pipeline. So going from cold to a closed deal. And I would say revenue operations is focused more on working with your existing or past pipeline and the clients.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. No, I always meet people around the world, whether that's in here in Europe, in Berlin. I think was my last encounter. I met a RevOps person, and she was like, "Frank, I'm not sure what these GTM engineers, what they're up to. You know, it seems like they're just crunching some spreadsheets. That's what my intern can do." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, but you know, there's also things like you need to know how to use APIs and how to stitch stuff together, how to make sense, and you need to be relatively business savvy. And you typically, I think for me, what the difference is that GTM engineers typically carry a target or a quota. I think in revenue operations, it is very common for you not to have any targets. Like, I mean, in RevOps generally is, you know, you put $1 in and you get sort of $3 out, right? So that's how I look at things in RevOps. But GTM engineers, like whenever I speak to GTM engineers and when I think about maybe hiring one or working with one, I think that the thing that they contribute in terms of KPI is actual pipe. So that means, you know, whether that's meetings or something else. And I think the backgrounds are a bit different.
Yeah.
From what I'm seeing, so a lot of the GTM engineers are actually former software engineers themselves.
That's true. That's very true.
There's also sales as well, and then the other type of people that I typically keep seeing is the fact that is the RevOps people. So that is they've transitioned from the RevOps side of things and managing HubSpot and billing and reports, and they wanted to have more of a, well, in their words, so typically more of an impact and having a KPI and carrying a pipeline target, right? So they feel like slightly more of an impact. And I think the way I look at it is that RevOps people are more of a back end, and GTM engineering is more of a front end, as in they're more closer to the front line than RevOps. I don't think that RevOps would ever jump on a call with a potential customer, whereas GTM engineers do jump on calls. So I think the closest thing there is maybe sales engineering or solution engineering for that sort of that compares to sort of an enterprise sales.
Yeah, that's very true. And also the timing for this conversation is very good because in our company at Strongest Group, we just hired our first, let's say, RevOps manager, Yona. He might be watching this podcast as well. I used to work with him before, and he used to do more of like cold email and GTM stuff. But now as he joined Strongest Group, his goal would be also to, in general, increase the productivity and also how much euros we get per each SDR who works in our company.
Gotcha.
This means that his goal would be to, for example, increase the amount of phone numbers a person has to call, maybe the quality of those phone numbers, and in general, automate the processes so that the people we have who do the cold calling in Finland, for example, or also abroad, they focus only on the calling. They don't do anything else besides calling the right people for the clients we have and just booking calls into their calendars.
Yeah, so it's all about naturally having the right systems built. So in your eyes, when it comes to, because, GTM engineers like yourself, it's all about building the right systems for every one of the clients. So how do you think about building the system? And actually, I think for every customer, even the two competitors, the systems are different.
Yeah.
So how do you think about system building or building the right outbound engine for the customers?
Yeah, I would say we always start with the basics. And I would say the first couple of weeks of the engagement, we focus particularly on the analysis of what the company has been doing before joining us. Basically, we want to see if they ran any outbound campaigns, how successful they were, what sort of scripts they were using. And quite often you would figure out that their scripts or the way they were running cold email was like too bad. And if you add a couple of tweaks, you can pretty much use what they've been running before and you would see great results. That's something we see quite often, that you don't have to, let's say, reinvent the wheel completely. Because
what would be the top 3 maybe mistakes that you would see? You're going to different companies, you're analyzing the what's inside, but what are the top 3 typical mistakes that founders or sales teams make?
Yeah, I would say infrastructure level. We can discuss, of course, the cold email infrastructure. They don't know how to set it up correctly, how to take care of it. Second is more about the offer, meaning they have a great product, but they just don't know how to make good offers. That's a big problem. And the third one, I would say the management conversion part, meaning they don't reply to the messages quite quickly. They don't have a setup process on how we turn a cold prospect into a booked meeting, and then from the booked meeting into the closed deal.
Gotcha. So the first one and the third one is kind of straightforward. But how do you think maybe then about offers? What makes a good offer?
I would use probably maybe it's overused, I don't know, but I love the Hormoz's value equation. So it's pretty basic because a lot of people already know about it, but it still works because people forget about the basics when they should be putting more of their time into mastering the basics. So but what we want to do is we want to focus on creating a quantifiable result and making it as risk-free for the prospect as possible. And we love including those offers, for example, in the call to action part of the cold email. And now,
can you give me maybe an example of that? So
So the structure we use, for example, if the offer, would you be interested in trying it out? So for example, if we give you a 3-day trial to our for our platform. Would you be interested?
Mm-hmm.
If we could increase your, I don't know, connection rates by 100% in 2 weeks, would you be curious enough to try it out? Something like that.
Gotcha. I typically like to reverse here a bit. Like, would you be against taking a peek? Would you be, so it's the other way to formulate the same thing. Would you be against taking a peek for 10 minutes of your time to see if it's worthwhile and kind of progressing forwards? It's like saying, would you be against generating more revenue? Or
basically.
And I would, we can kind of discuss this like nonstop, how to make the best offers, but I'm typically a big believer that you should just do, a lot of sort of multivariate testing. So have like 3 to 5 maybe variants as in offers, or maybe pain points that you're trying to drill down on, and just to see which one will win, because you're not really sure, right? Especially if the customer has not, prior data maybe, or they don't do any testing, right? So you're not really sure what is, what works, what doesn't, right? So, and the best way to figure out is just to test it ultimately, right? So do you see our customers actually doing a lot of tests on your end?
On their own, I wouldn't say so.
Mm-hmm. Any particular reason do you think that's the case?
Maybe because they think that only one group or like one part of their RCP would convert, or like it converts right now, so they don't want to change anything. But then, for example, this audience is already, let's say, it's overwhelmed like with the offers, and they just keep running it again and again.
Mm-hmm.
So the audience is kind of like tired of it. But then they think like, what's next? And they're kind of lost because there is so much noise and like so many things you could do. So they just like get derailed in details, like basically.
Mm-hmm. So when you kind of go back to the outbound and building the right systems, so a part of the 3 things that you mentioned, what else are you guys digging into with every one of your customers?
I would say maximizing on the multi-channel approach.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing. Again, thanks to the Salesforge that you guys have this option. We see that a simple flow, instead of running, for example, 3-4 emails, if you run 2 emails and then you send 2 LinkedIn messages, this works like magic for the majority of clients. And we see that if people are able to look at you from different platforms, from different angles, they are much more, let's say, able to convert.
Makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, that, a lot of the mailboxes today are pretty, let's call it bombed in terms of the, number of emails that maybe people are getting, or people just have what's called an email fatigue. So they're just less likely to respond on email. And on LinkedIn, they're more likely to respond, but there's also naturally your face, right? When you're reaching out to people, because that's a bit of a social media. But from our data, having billions of activities in the platform every single month, we see that that on email, probably you would get like 1 to 5% reply rate if you're doing a good job typically.
That's pretty normal.
Unless you're doing localization, so you have a native language that's baked in. For example, in Finland, you have a Finnish language in play, and same in Sweden, the same in other markets in Europe. But that's, I would say, European thing. And in the US, naturally, everything is English, so there's high saturation levels. But when it comes to LinkedIn, we see then 10 to 30% if you're doing a good job. But ultimately, the other way to look at it is that for every positive reply that you're getting an email, you're going to get typically 5 on LinkedIn. And that's assuming your customers are on LinkedIn. But then also the other dilemma is that on LinkedIn, only maybe 40 to 60% of people actually connect with you, right? So then you kind of have to think about the fact that, okay, if they do not connect with me, you can still go and engage via email or other channels. So apart from these 2 channels, so which is, I think, very common, email, LinkedIn, I think you mentioned you have reps also calling. Can you kind of elaborate on that maybe?
Yeah, we are very heavy on cold calling as well. I would say the strongest group started as the SDR as a service company. Okay. So pretty much in Finland, we have still this part operating, just people doing cold calling.
How many SDRs you have?
About 50.
Wow,
that's pretty big. And we're hiring, like for this year, we are planning at least on 70 to 100 more SDRs.
It reminds me of my old days, guys. I used to be a VP sales with a sales team of 50, and I only had 20 plus SDRs. We used to cold call all around the world in the early mornings at 6 a.m. I remember out of Europe, Australia, we used to cold call.
Oh, wow.
And this is where you would get the best pickup rates because the saturation levels were very low. And Aussies would love to talk to you because, cold calling there is really, really rare. And then second best pickup rates were in Europe, and then the worst were in the US because everybody's calling the US from all around the world. So that's interesting to see. So so these are naturally the very typical three channels in sales. I assume that most of the kind of sort of the email flows, you're just automating most of the parts, so SDRs don't get necessarily involved in that. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, that's correct. So we only give them, let's say, either a brand new list, which we haven't targeted with the emails or LinkedIn, basically, so they can just call like the cold audience.
Yeah.
Or if we have targeted someone, for example, they responded positively, they haven't booked a meeting with us, we want to retarget them by just giving them a call, which works much better than just hiding behind the screen and trying to book them by sending 10 LinkedIn messages.
Gotcha. So these are naturally the three, I'm going to call them very traditional channels, right, in Outbound. Have you considered doing any other sort of what I was going to describe experimental channels that are on top of the three channels?
Yeah, we are now trying to figure out how we can enable, let's say, the referral part for our clients. This kind of requires a bit different approach, because what we want to do is basically we want to take their existing customer base, maybe also segment them by the satisfaction level. So it still requires a bit of manual work. And what we want to do is just send like, hey, I hope you're enjoying our platform. Would you be interested like in attracting people, and we would give you some sort of kickback? Something like this.
Nice. I do something like this on the inbound funnel. So when people are signing up, then I think on the day 7, we'd ask, how's the experience like with the platform? And then there's a little PS, hey, do you know maybe anybody else that may benefit from using Salesforge? So it just these little, so in the US, it's very common to ask for, these specific set of customers, whether they know what's called lookalikes or other businesses essentially that may benefit from that. And that's something that's ingrained, I think, in the US culture. And Europeans really struggle with that. Struggle with the fact to ask, hey, do you know somebody else that may benefit, for example, getting this exact service, And that is, I think, one of the easiest ways to generate net new customers. If you're just asking, hey, you're having a good time, do you know other people that may, it's essentially what I call engineering word of mouth, right? So that's your good way. Because people are like, I know actually Johnny may benefit from this. He has a huge SAM. He needs some emails, LinkedIn, whatever, right? So, all right. So that totally makes sense. And I think also sort of reaching out also to your existing book of business as well, and just kind of maybe once a quarter, whatever, asking them for it. What else maybe have you tested, maybe has failed, or you have seen success in the past?
We see mixed success with the website visitors. So this is also pretty interesting, I would say, a channel of potential like new customers. We've been testing it out only for the clients which have a strong, let's say, traffic going from the US. Because in Europe, basically, you have GDPR. So it's, I would say, semi-legal to do it, and we would rather not risk the reputation of our clients. So basically, if they have a big traffic from the US, we can run our B2B to identify the website visitors. However, the problem is that it's not very accurate in a lot of cases. And we just waste money and time like setting up the system, which might give you like 1 to 2, maybe 5 leads per month. I don't say it's necessarily bad, but if you take a look at how much time you spend building, let's say, the clay table, which would automatically qualify or disqualify the prospects, quite often it's not worth it, honestly.
Can you walk me through a bit more what RB2B does?
Yeah, so RB2B is pretty much 2 lines of code which you install on your website. And as soon as someone enters your website and they click, I accept all cookies, you can track who they are and what they are doing on the website. So quite often what you can do is you can capture the intent while it's still hot. And so you get, for example, John is visiting your website. He visits particularly the pricing page, meaning that maybe he's interested because pricing page is pretty strong indicator.
Gotcha. So I guess the tech works on the IP reversal. And I think I used to work in the ad tech business. So I think the IPs come from the publishers where users sign into those publishers. Could be, I don't know, like CNN or whatever, you sign in. They pick up your IP, and then if you visit other sites, then you can say John's visiting. your site. So okay, makes sense. So we're one of those businesses, right? We're based in Europe, right? But we have majority of our traffic is US based. So like we will be, an example, I guess, customer of something like our B2B. The other way we can see how you can increase the percentage is simply by having more vendors baked into your site. But then that does become more costly then, essentially what's called the waterfall logic, right? So you use multiple providers, and I think another tool out there has that, Clay, where they have multiple providers. It's like a waterfall system where they identify.
Basically.
And it can get very expensive actually to run this across the whole site. So let's say in our case we have 4 million pages, and if we would run across 4 million pages, it would be very expensive because they do charge for usage. So what I've found that if you have a lot of traffic like we do, is that just put it on the high intent pages, like a pricing page, integrations page, or maybe even competitor comparison pages we do. So us versus our competitor, or even competitor 1 versus competitor 2, and then us as well, and then fire off intent on there. The other maybe thing that at least works for us, because we have a lot of potential customers on LinkedIn. We also do social listening on LinkedIn. So when somebody drops a particular pain that they may be having, or they're not satisfied with the competitor on LinkedIn, we also pull that and then engage with the individual. So that works really well. So maybe let's dive maybe a bit more into this. So as in, how do you actually build a system, considering that you could be reaching out or going to market in different ways? So there's typically actually a concept that's known in space, and it's trending a lot, which is called signal-based outreach, right? So you're leveraging signals to engage, or what I call the spearhead approach. We are targeting, in our market, and only if there's a signal, then we're reaching out. Versus the other approach, where it maybe has a negative connotation, where people think you're spamming them. But typically, I would say the other approach, which is reaching out to every single one of your ICPs once a quarter, like knocking your doors. That's what I would typically call in business wide net approach. We're casting a wider net on the market. Or you're also doing advertising, right? So you're advertising once a quarter to every single individual, and trying to see whether they're in market for your product. And the reason why that is a concept is because you can never figure out, for a lot of maybe segments, when's the best time to reach out, right? Because timing is one of the things you cannot control in sales.
Definitely.
So walk me through how you think about this. Do you predominantly use just the signals? Do you use the wide net? What's your take on this?
I would say you need to run a mix of both. So if you're only doing signal-based outreach, or you're doing like the carpet bombarding style, it wouldn't work really nice. So you better combine them both, let's say, and run occasionally depending on what sort of business you have. I would say signal-based approach is nice, but sometimes you can also get like lost in the sauce. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, what do you mean by this?
You mean there are like so many concepts. Like, for example, I was studying really hard the concept which is called like PVP, so permissionless value proposition. It's very nice, where you use, for example, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different data sources. You compile them together into very nice looking cold email. However, the problem with that, even though I really love it, and sometimes we use it for our clients, you can have, for example, 40,000, HR managers you can reach out to. And if you do like those particular PVPs, out of 40,000, you would have maybe like 500, which would fit this particular PVP criteria. And you spend so much time on building the workflow, finding all of those data points. So sometimes it's really hard. And as I said, you can get lost in the details. So what I would focus on is, when you write the cold email, the first line for us, at least, it's always some sort of observation. That's where I would put the majority of the, let's say, research power. So if you nail down the observation line, which makes them hooked enough to even like open the email from the preview, to like open it completely and read it in the full, that's all you need kind of to make it work. And you don't have to overcomplicate it. So if you can make a really healthy observation, sound it as human-like as possible, that's already enough. And I would already call it some sort of signal-based outreach. Then you can run into asking them, how we call it, poke the bear question. So you ask them the question about the problem they are very likely to experience, which provokes some sort of, let's say, emotional response. And then you do your offer. So I would say you need to nail down the observation line with the research, and then you need to make sure your offer is good. So this is all you need pretty much when it comes to signal-based outreach.
Gotcha. Yeah, a lot of folks, that I speak to that are in go-to-market market teams, is the fact that when you're applying signals, then the audience size massively reduces.
Yeah.
Right, so you don't have much to work with, and even from what I've seen internally, when people are qualifying lists, so there's a way to qualify lists. Whether in our case, we have a sort of, let's call it the qualifier, or in other systems like Clay, you have this sort of Claygen called. But ultimately, you can ask any question about that particular lead.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, let's say the question is, do they have a pricing page? For example, very simple question. So on the website, a lot of companies don't have a pricing page, and then it would disqualify a very, very big chunk essentially of the list, right? So, and most of the times when you qualify, up to sort of 80 to 90% of people in the list are disqualified when you're looking for something very, very specific.
That's true.
But what I find is if the lists are dirty, you want to qualify them, because I think one of the problems is, which leads to a lot of problems generally in the business, is you're reaching out to the wrong people.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to be reaching out to the wrong people, it's not going to resonate. They're going to spam report you, and so on and so forth. So how do you maybe think about sort of juggling this sort of, the size of the list, not reaching out to the wrong people? How do you think about sort of this dilemma?
I would say if we run, let's say, a wider test, so we don't do any sort of signal-based outreach, which is pretty true. We do it for some clients, and for some clients we don't do it. What we try to focus on is making really good offers, and tie them to specific buyer personas. Because you can have the product which is universal, but the way that, for example, CMO and CEO perceives it, it's completely different. So the buying, let's say, the reason for buying this product from the CMO and CEO, they are different. So when we run, let's say, those wider tests, we want to nail down the offer to particular titles. So that's how we do it. So you can have a company, they have a couple of decision makers. We want to spread those offers across different decision makers and see if this offer resonates more with X person or Y person. That's the whole idea. And also what we try to do is, if we run those wider tests, the copy is super short, like basically 2 lines.
Yeah. So one thing just comes into my mind about when it comes to signals is that one of the signals that is in the space when somebody raises a new funding round.
Yeah.
I remember when we raised our pre-seed round back in the days, so many people have reached out. And I bet once we raise our next round, which is Series A round, which is coming around the corner, I bet hundreds and hundreds of companies will reach out to me. So considering the fact that these signals are, let's call it publicly signals that you can identify, don't you think that a lot of the signals are being commoditized like super, super fast, and essentially they lose its effectiveness? Because if everybody has access to signals, so if everybody reaches out to me when I'm raising my next round, what's the point of that?
Yeah, I agree.
Isn't the better signal, which is, I don't think it's available, the signal, let's reach out to Frank before he raises his Series A, right? So now that I mentioned this, is already a signal, right? So, right, I think also, I think a lot of the signals are it's a bit too late. You want to be reaching out, and this is the hardest thing to find out, is like, when's the time. You want to reach out before the signal kicks in, right? Before it's publicly available. And I think one of the ways maybe that I have thought of this to myself, how to do that, is either analyzing the posts of the CEO, and I think you can predict that the Series A maybe is coming, because some people share the revenue data maybe, or the way they're growing, or how many demos they have in the calendar every day, or whatever. And then the other thing I think is the headcount growth, I think, of a company. And I think you can sort of sense that around, if the growth is at X percentage point every month, I think that also can signal something to engage. And to me, these sort of signals or data points are a lot more powerful than just waiting for the fundraising signal sort of to kick in. So what are your thoughts about? Have you maybe seen some other maybe data points being used rather than these typical sort of signals?
I think that's a way to go. So you either, I would say, you can stack a couple of signals, you combine them, then your message, I would say, is much more powerful.
Can you give me an example maybe of how you would stack maybe a couple or 3 signals?
I would say, for example, we love using hiring sprees. I would say that's a pretty good indicator of whether the company is growing or not. We can also compare the hiring spree to their current, let's say, headcount and the distribution between the different roles. So, for example, if they have, let's say, a sales team which is just like 5 people, and now they're hiring, let's say, for 5 more SDRs. This could be a pretty good, let's say, way to leverage and stack those signals. Or if we have seen that it has been 5 people in the sales team for, I don't know, a year, and now they suddenly start hiring. This could be used of course, you need the context, but this could be used really well when you're crafting your message, as the example.
Nice. So interesting. When we in our business, naturally, because we have a full-on autonomous AI agent named Agent Frank, named after me, we would use actually a hiring signal to say stop hiring. That would be our subject line. Stop hiring. Have you considered maybe blending your current team with AI SDRs?
That's very smart.
So right. So it's a bit of a pattern interrupt there. So now let's maybe go into this kind of topic of maybe leveraging not just great workflows, but like how do you think about blending in sort of systems and agents? Do you do a lot of that? So the reason why I'm also talking about this is because I just recently watched a podcast between 20VC and the CEO of Monday.com, where they talked about the fact that the biggest cost in a company is labor. So for them, labor cost is about 60% in Monday.com. They spend like $1 billion a year on a lot of different things, naturally, but 60% is labor, and then less than 10% is software. And I think what he mentioned and what I'm seeing as well is the fact that we will need fewer individuals to achieve the same output levels or even increase output levels by bringing in various capabilities, right? So we have right now Claude Code trending, Open Claude, and a lot of different, there's agents and NA10 automations. So how do you think about that sort of a world on top of what you're currently doing?
Yeah, I think we are entering this era of reducing actually the headcount, not increasing it. Because the people who have AI agents, their work is much more leveraged. So one SDR, I would say, with AI agents in his, let's say, backpack, which he can just use whenever he needs them, it's much more powerful than having 5 SDRs doing the same kind of job. And also, we have a really nice example with Open Claude, the guy who made his software in like 90 days or something. I saw like this post trending on Twitter where it was something like, "Hey Claude, make me a perfect agent in like 90 days and make no mistakes." This is pretty much what happened. So one guy has built a really nice product, and now it got acquired by OpenAI. So that's a really strong signal that we have to also think into that direction. And I would be lying if I told you that we don't use any sort of coding software or AI agents in our work.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, also think of from this point, when I was a VP sales, prior to Salesforge, or even before that, that for every 10 salespeople that you hire, maybe only one person is sort of natural at their job. 2 to 3 people can be trained up because they're like a sponge, right? They suck in the information. They want to learn. They want to progress, right? And there's potential essentially there. But really, like 50 to 60% of people are what I typically describe deadwood. They should not be in their jobs, and they're just looking for any job, right? And somehow they end up in sales or whatever else that they're doing. But you're far, far more efficient if you only had this 40% of the labor of the team, and you give them a bunch of AI agents, whatever, agent friend, whatever you want to give it to them, and that would increase their output levels. And you could even pay them more, etc. And that still will make you far more profitable as a business.
Of course.
Because having too many people in your team leads to what's called the people problems. There's everybody that has been managing teams knows about it. More bodies in your team does not mean you're more successful. It's about more good bodies, or A players essentially that you're getting into your team. rather than we're just hiring 100 salespeople, or 50 salespeople,
Yeah.
etc. So maybe here's a interesting question. So you said you have 50 cold callers, right? So how do you think about, okay, you have a team of 50 and then you know that the agents are coming. How do you think about that?
It's a bit harder with the cold calling part, I would say, because I don't think there is a really efficient software which could replace those people.
Okay.
And I'm really happy about that, because I personally don't want to live in the world where it's only AI agents and AI is doing everything. I still want to have like this, let's say, human touch.
Okay. But don't you think that, we are getting inevitably to a phase in the economy where AI agents will talk to AI agents because two humans are inefficient to talk to each other?
Yeah, it sounds maybe a bit like utopia, but I'm kind of like, I see it coming in some, let's say, industries for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, interesting. So, I mean, on one hand, you still have the legislation in Europe and the US that prohibits agentic calling or any form of robocalling. I actually do get AI agent calls, weirdly enough, and these are outbound calls. And the reason why I know is I'm sometimes suspicious when I get a call and I pick up, and it's like you feel like it's not a real call, and it says, "Is it Frank?" And then all you have to do is just pause and say nothing.
Okay.
So that I literally got a call last week, and I literally said nothing, and I was waiting for the person to say, "Is it Frank? Is it Frank?" Like, to repeat and to try and speak to me. But he said nothing because the way that, AI maybe works today, or maybe it was not a very good AI agent, is it's looking for a response from me, but I'm not giving it a response on purpose. And I was literally holding my phone, and I was just trying to say nothing. And yes, it wasn't the agent that just dropped,
Interesting.
So it is coming, but so on the inbound front, it is still illegal, and you can, with consent, if people, take the consent button, the box, not button, the box, then naturally within your TNCs, you can outline that you may be using autonomous systems to engage, and that works pretty well. And I have actually seen I've seen amazing conversations also last week, actually, with 11 Labs, where it was beautiful, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, because you can apply any accent, you can make the agent speak in a very particular way, to try and arrive to a particular goal. And that conversation that I've heard last week using 11 Labs models, I mean, it sounded like a real person. Like, I would not be able to say that it was not an AI agent. That's where we are at. And I think the other thing that we're naturally seeing, and this is maybe where I want to ask you a question, we're also seeing a huge progression on the LLM front when it comes to videos. Right? So today you can, I think we just had a recently launch of Nano Banana 2.
Mm-hmm.
We had some other models being launched, etc., on the video front. But ultimately today you can compute videos that where you look at the person, that video, you think it's real, but it's not real. So how do you think maybe about the world of videos? Do you guys use videos to engage with your prospects? Is that something you're looking into? Have you thought about using what's called deep fakes, essentially, to engage with your prospects?
Yeah, we're doing it only for our internal sales.
Okay.
Because we see if you send a video message to a prospect on LinkedIn, for example, and you're not afraid to show your face, this is a pretty good way to do, let's say, sales on LinkedIn right now. Mm-hmm. And we're thinking about a way of automating this.
Okay.
Because I don't want to see it, let's say, and waste 2 to 3 hours every day just by sending the same sort of video to each prospect and just changing the name at the beginning of my video. So that's definitely something we are looking into implementing.
I had a user of mine, actually, where we used this tool where I'm literally just changing the first name.
Okay.
And then I'm talking on the background of their website. And that's an inbound video that gets sent out.
Yeah.
And so that user is very savvy and said, "Frank, I was expecting you're going to talk about my business and my problems and how your solution would solve my problems. But, this is why you need to use actually a deepfake, full-on deepfake, because that was more of a, let's call it a rules-based video where, yes, you're using AI just to pronounce the first name, and the rest of the message is still being said by me, and it's the same message that gets out on inbound."
Exactly.
But what we're moving slowly but surely on our inbound motion is that every single thing that we're going to do is what we call programmatic or unique to that person. So one of the things that we're already doing is we're using the engine of Agent Frank to actually craft a unique email on inbound. So imagine you sign up to my software, and and it will be a unique message that will be sent to you because we're going to analyze what you are as a business. We're going to go to your website, your LinkedIn profile, and our data sources. We're going to figure out who has signed up, who is Lip, what's his background, and based on that, essentially, we will then craft a unique email in this particular case, but the video is not necessarily unique to you. So that's, for example, where we see other types of communication getting more programmatic. And I think in video in particular, I think there's a huge opportunity. But I think where we're getting in the world is like, if everything can be deep faked, right? Then you're not really sure what is real, what is not when you look at a video, right? But I remember these deep fakes maybe a few years ago where you could just deep fake a president and them saying, doesn't matter whether it's Vladimir Putin or Trump or whatever, Barack Obama. It just becomes dangerous, I think, when it comes to that sort of, because there's a lot of misinformation. But I think in sales, if you constrain that to purely for selling, I think it will do wonders. Because ultimately, I think the dilemma also with videos is that a lot of humans are not good at just doing good videos. Or you have to refilm like multiple times. So if you've been in sales, you always know this, like, oh, I filmed it, oh, it's not perfect. You can do another 10 takes and it's still not good. But guess what? AI will make it perfect. Or you just need to maybe reprompt it and stuff like that, right? So
agree. You can definitely fine-tune it and it will work. I'm sure it will work well.
Yeah.
Also, in regards to like inbound calls, I also saw like a big trend, like the agencies are coming up, which are just selling the AI receptionist to, for example, dental clinics.
Yeah.
That's a very good use case of it.
And that's a good business. I already know a few companies that make millions of dollars just on that use case. Dental clinics in the US, and just having an AI receptionist with just response. So it's a huge thing because naturally there's a lot of inbound calls, right? Yeah. And missing inbound calls essentially is very expensive. So yes, same with restaurants maybe where you have to take in the bookings. So we're seeing more and more of that. I think the craziest thing I've seen recently, and it was not even proposed by me, but effectively it's the ability to send a unique song to your prospect. Imagine if you go to your if you go on your LinkedIn and you'll do this voice note, but instead of a typical voice note that the human says, there's just a little song that you're attaching and sending it over. But awesome. Yeah, people getting more and more creative in terms of I think the outreach, and I think creative outreach, or creative outreach is something that you would not expect. Naturally, definitely resonates a lot more and drives just better results. So let's go into maybe the segment that's kind of close to my heart, which is making mistakes. Naturally, when you start, when doing outreach or building systems, everybody makes mistakes, right? Yeah. And I always typically say you need to run a lot of tests to actually be successful. So to win a single test, for example, in a company, you need to run 10. That means a lot of mistakes will be made.
Of course.
So how do you think about, maybe about your customers and when you're speaking to your customers, naturally wanting to run a lot of different tests? And how do you think about failure when it comes to doing outbound?
I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. Mm-hmm. We have, I would say, probably more unsuccessful campaigns than successful campaigns. And I'm absolutely okay with admitting this. It's not a big issue for me. However, what is important is that you make, as you said, a lot of different tests and you don't stop testing. Mm-hmm. This might be a bit harder, I would say, if your TAM, like total addressable market, is quite small. But I would still say you need to make a couple of healthy assumptions on what is going to work or not. Of course, when you work with multiple clients, you get more of this like experience, and you somehow develop like a seventh sense on what is going to work and what is going to fail. And also what is important, I would say, how we can avoid making the mistakes. I would say if you're, for example, running like outbound for different companies, don't think that your client is like, doesn't know anything about outbound. Quite often, as I mentioned at the beginning, what they've been doing is already pretty good. What you just have to do is like fine tune it, and it will definitely create the results. But ultimately, do a lot of tests. Don't be afraid of like making mistakes, and make sure you use as much data from your clients, from past activities as possible, because there are a lot of golden nuggets there. And if you just ignore it completely and think like, yeah, we are the smartest, you sign up to work with us, it's the wrong approach.
Yeah. The way I typically look at failure is it's about generating as many learnings as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And to generate learnings, you need to be not afraid to fail. Right. Failure is good because that leads to learning. So as long as you don't repeat the same failure, it's all good. I mean, there's also the thing called, for example, rerunning tests, right? That
Yeah.
we've been failing. So I'll give you an example of a failed test. So last year we did what's called a direct mail campaign, right? So we do a lot of things outside of the ordinary three channels.
Okay.
So direct mail was one of them. And we thought, well, if everybody gets emails, I've never in my life got a direct mail sent to me still to date. It's kind of strange. I'm a CEO for SaaS company doing pretty well. I don't get direct mail. I don't know why. Nobody's sending me. But I would think to myself, hey, if I would send in an envelope, a nice little message to them that would remember me, it would be a pattern interrupt, right?
Of course.
And as long as it has an interesting offer, I would probably explore that, etc. And I thought, okay, let's run a test. So the test size was there were 4,000 VP sales in the US, and we've sent it off. We found the addresses. We sent it to their main address of the office. But funny enough, we got maybe one response, and I still today don't know where was the actual where was the issue in itself. Was it that we sent to the wrong addresses?
Mm-hmm.
What was the issue? So that's something, for example, back in my mind, I'm thinking, damn, it's a failed test. But in this particular case, what did I learn? I don't know why it failed really.
Yeah.
So what I would do, I'm definitely a person that would want to retest this. So we want to retest direct mail this year.
Of course.
But we want to change what we call the parameters of the test.
Yeah.
So the parameters of the test will be switching, say, from the US to UK, which is our secondary market.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would look at, instead of sending, something in an envelope and we send them off, we'd actually send a postcard.
That's nice.
Right? So it's still a direct mail test. So we're sending something over which is physical, which it seems like it's handwritten. We send it off, and then again to a bunch of VP sales around the UK, and then we would want to check what the response is like on that. But that's how I think about okay, you have failed, but are you in the mindset, or are you willing to retest? But yeah, you want to kind of maybe change the parameters of the test too, right? So so yeah. Interesting. I have some bunch of questions for you that I want to ask, very specific questions that I have in mind. And I want to see how you're going to go about it. So first one I have is, how do you think about the difference between a GTM engineer, so like yourself, and an SDR that, does the cold calls for me, or the SDRs that you have? How do you think about these two different roles? Because still in a lot of companies, people don't have GTM engineers, right? They just have SDRs typically. Basically. So walk me through this SDRs and then GTM engineers. And should companies have a GTM engineer, or should a GTM engineer be outsourced, through an agency?
Okay, that's a nice question. First of all, I would say SDRs, how I perceive them, they are mostly on the forefront. So as a GTM engineer, for example, I don't see them doing the cold calls, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather envision them building the back end of sending system and all of this stuff. So I would say SDR is someone who can pick up the phone and call. He can also do the prospecting on LinkedIn, or even send a cold email. However, the biggest difference for me is that SDR is not technically savvy and technically equipped as the go-to-market engineer is. Mm-hmm. So go-to-market engineer is someone who knows how to sell, but also what is important, he has this leverage of knowing how to use different platforms, how to scrape leads, how to create personalization, how to connect different API keys. So you use different platforms, you want to connect them together. That's what I would say is the biggest difference. So SDRs are more on the forefront, and go-to-market engineers are more on the back end, but they're also much more tech savvy and tech equipped.
Yeah. Last weekend I was in Munich in Germany, and went to a GTM hackathon, and there were 100 plus GTM engineers in one place, and we're just hacking stuff together. It's just interesting to see, how people approach the problem of building pipeline. How would GTM engineers approach that versus SDR. So SDRs would typically probably look at leveraging the current systems that they have in place. Whereas I think GTM engineers today, a lot more of them use things like Cloud Code and Open Cloud, etc.
Yes.
They're kind of hacking or trying to reach out in a more of a, let's call it, unique way, in a way that has never been seen before. Whereas SDRs would use proven sort of playbooks already.
Definitely.
Something sort of, hey, it works. I'm just doing this. Like a like as part of a process. Alrighty.
Yeah.
If a company today does not do outbound, and a lot of companies don't do outbound, do you believe that every B2B company should do outbound? Maybe is the first question, and then the sub question of that is like, if yes, what is the good amount of people, or like how to think about outbound? Do you need to hire a couple of reps, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, we have, for example, one big client. They're local, and they have never run outbound before. Like they had a couple of agencies which they used to work with, but it wasn't something like too serious, I would say. They have never run like a sufficient amount of tests. And also, for example, they've never done cold calling at all. So the majority of the business was like product-led growth pretty much. So the person sees the website, he signs up, he buys what he needs, that's it. And basically, it's a very interesting case for us as well, because we are right now running a lot of different outbound tests for them. And again, I would say 60% of them are not successful, but we have found a couple of interesting use cases on how we can help them get more customers. So I would say at some point, you definitely want to run outbound, yes, if you have really ambitious goals, which you think like you cannot achieve by just doing the referrals or like inbound or ads. Outbound is definitely something which can help you a lot. And when it comes to the process of how to build it, I would say there is no one right approach, because I had a prospect who reached out to me at the beginning of this year. He really wanted to work with us, with Strongest Group. But then after 20 to 30 minutes of our chat, we figure out that he might not actually need our help, because their product is very specific, and who he actually needs is maybe like one SDR who he can train up to the level of understanding as he has. And then this person would be very successful in finding new and generating the pipeline. So I would say there is no right way to do it. However, some people, they want to own the processes. They want to make sure that the knowledge stays inside their company. Then they should look into like hiring someone. But then there are a couple of constraints like time to results, times like to ramp those people up so they are fully, let's say, integrated with the product. They know what your company is about. Whilst a go-to-market agency like ourselves, we have already some sort of like pre-built, developed playbooks. We have more experience and understanding, so we could just like poke you where you should go and where you should put the testing power in.
Yeah, makes sense. So when it comes to maybe specifically on one of the problems that everybody has, so as a founder, one of my biggest problems is what I call the human problem, essentially hiring the right people.
Yeah.
I bet for the agencies it's the same thing.
Same.
Right? So how do you approach hiring? How do you look at hiring? What are you looking in people? Right? Because if you're hiring for very smart, let's call GTM people, SDRs, right, to do cold calls, etc., how do you look at the best in class people, and what sort of traits are you looking for?
I would say motivation is definitely not enough, because everybody can be motivated. What we are looking at is definitely track record. This is very important for us. For example, we have recently hired a go-to-market engineer for our department. And the reason we hired him wasn't only because he was motivated, he was cool, but also he was like super proactive. As soon as we made a job posting, this person reached out maybe within 30 minutes in Slack. He was willing to do like a task straight away. We saw his sort of credentials, which really, let's say, piqued our attention. And what was also nice that, as I said, this person was willing to do the task, and he completely excelled in it. So we just gave him a real client example, And surprisingly enough, this person has discovered a couple of angles which we weren't thinking about. So I would say out of the box thinking is also something we are looking for. So,
exactly. Yeah, because naturally there will be different problems that would need to be solved.
Yeah.
Right. And you need a person that thinks how to solve these problems. I call these people sometimes tinkerers, essentially. They tinker with things and they have a problem. And then when they tinker around, with different tools, processes, or like looking in the market, they're just trying to find a way on how to solve the problems. And these are essentially also the other way to describe they're problem solvers, right?
Yeah.
So, and one thing, you mentioned proactiveness. Yes, that's definitely a super strong signal. They asking the right questions. For example, typically the way I phrase, who are the best people to hire is I would typically say they ask the best questions, or they ask questions. A lot of people, fun fact, a lot of people don't ask questions. You go to an interview, or you interview somebody, and I would ask, do you have any questions? Nope. I was like, it's not really a good sign, really. What you would want to do in sales is probably ask, let's say you're applying for a sales role, is what's the ICP I would need to work, which markets, what are typical pain points, why are we winning deals, why are we losing deals, how does the commission structure work? Because people are trying to figure out how can they, how much money, or how could they earn here, right? So because people are money motivated, they would ask all the right questions to try and see what are the places for them. Whereas if you don't ask any questions, like you're typically you're just trying to get whatever job you can get, right? So you're not really deeply interested. Sure. You don't have the curiosity around working in that particular place. And that's why a lot of people don't get the jobs, because it's just, a lot of candidates are just meh.
That's very true. And also, I would say what is really cool when you see people who are not rushing into joining you, in a way that I saw Harry, who is like my colleague. He was running a couple of interviews and he asked a couple of people, why should we hire you? And one person said, which was really nice, I'm not sure you should still hire me. I'm not sure yet if I'm, for example, the right fit. So what I liked about this response is that this person is not really pushy, and he's not trying to run into this role, but rather he has a cold mind. He tries to understand whether this place is right for him. And he was also actually asking a lot of nice questions. So definitely the chances of him being hired were very high.
Alrighty, let's go into another batch of questions I've got for you, specifically around, I guess, when you're having conversations with your prospective customers, kind of similar to us.
Yeah.
I would bump into somebody and I'll say, hey, you doing any outreach at all? And the person says, no, I'm not. Cold email is dead. It never works.
Yeah.
Same with any other outreach, right? People just don't believe in that and just keep on doing stuff on inbound. But then on inbound, you also know that you can also make the same statement about Google Ads and stuff like that. So how do you think about, or how do you approach this? You're speaking to, let's call you a big fish. Let's call it, let's take if Lovable. Yeah. Lovable in Sweden, you somehow manage to meet them, and Lovable says, nope, cold email does not work, outbound does not work, so we don't do that. So how would you approach that?
I actually need to think about it a bit, but the very first thing which comes to mind, I would probably not even try to kind of push them to tell them, that it definitely works. You need to start doing it. What I would try to understand more is why at the first place they took a call. There is definitely something which interested them. For example, if they wanted to enter Finland, I can give you 100 reasons why, for example, cold calling and cold emails would work much better than, for example, running ads there. But they kind of, by asking them the right questions, they need to come to this conclusion themselves.
So let's take an example, ads versus outreach.
Yeah.
Right. So let's take Finland as an example, right? So walk me through maybe some of maybe just top 3 reasons why the outreach part maybe is a lot more efficient or better, whatever.
Yeah. First of all, people in Finland, what I've learned, they feel privileged when you reach out to them, especially when you call them. I have a very good friend who is also doing cold calling for the companies. And one particular project is investment, fundraising, basically. And he has this Web3 project, and he was pretty much calling the plumbers, the construction guys. And the investment was starting from 5K, which is not too much money, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were talking to them about investment, they felt like really privileged that out of all people, you decided to call particularly this person. So definitely, for example, for Finland, it's part of the culture, and it would work, 100% better than running any sort of ads. Secondly, I would say the costs.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to PrimeForge, get yourself 10 domains, 20 email accounts. It would cost you like $100 per month. You get Salesforce subscription, $196 per month, and you're already up and running. You can build a lead list also inside LeadsForge, which wouldn't cost you too much money. And at the end, you can reach out pretty much the same amount of people, which the same as with ads. But the, let's say, resource allocation is much lower on the outbound side. That's the second reason. And third reason, I would also say that you don't, it's maybe arguably, but you don't need to know that much when it comes to running, let's say, cold email campaigns, like simple ones. Because with Facebook ads, for example, what I've learned, you need to know how to install like the tracking pixel, how to write a really nice copy. It's same with the outbound, but still it's a bit different. There are more factors to why things work or not compared to cold email. In cold email, it's either the infrastructure, the targeting, or the offer. If you, let's say, tick off all three, then you should be getting results. While with Facebook or Google ads, a lot of stuff comes up, actually.
Gotcha. So, all right. So let's maybe dive into something, that typically then again, folks are discussing, and this is what I'm also discussing with a lot of the other folks, which is the ICP. And I always ask this question to a lot of people when I jump on the call. Hey, what's your ICP? And people are like, I'm not really, everybody's my ICP in this particular segment, or even the whole country. And it's like any business could buy this. I literally had the guy yesterday that built this sort of marketing tool for all businesses in the world.
Okay.
He said any marketing. He was from Denmark, fun fact.
Okay.
And he's like, Frank, I built this, and anybody could use this. It's this really, really, great tool. Blah blah blah. And I know that you're up for failure. When it says anybody could use it, any marketing team could use this, right? So my question to you is how do you think about really narrowing that down on sort of the ICP? How do you run this maybe process with your current customers, or do they give you, or maybe do already the customers know who the ICP is? Walk me through this particular bit.
I would say our process consists of two things. First of all, we are looking at the current data or historic data. Basically, you can just open, of course, if they give you access, and I would assume you have good relationships. So your client can show you a list of their clients. What you can do is pretty much analyze who bought on which tier, for example, if it's a SaaS, what sort of subscription. And you can also run through all of those clients and ask why. So basically, what you need is who bought which person, what sort of company, and the reason why they bought it. And this would already give you you could do the analysis and find particular patterns. Okay, we see that 50% of your current customers are CMOs of some e-commerce brands in the US. Boom, you already have some sort of idea on who you can target first, because you already see a good pattern that these people buy. And second thing I would say is just deep research and analysis of the whole industry. What we love doing is we use OpenAI and we use Gemini to run deep researches on particular, let's say, industries and competitors. So it's never, let's say, there is never too much of the research. You can always do more. But what we try to analyze is the industry trends, where the market is going right now, where the shift is happening. And we also try to understand the competitors of our client. How they operate, why does it work for them, any particular signals or maybe updates they roll out, which might signal about who is going to buy from them. And if you combine those two, I would say you would have more than enough data for at least a couple of tests and a couple of really extensive outbound campaigns.
Gotcha. So once you have the ICP, ironed out, what would you say then, when it comes to then engaging with those ICPs? How do you think about relevance versus personalization
Yeah.
when it comes to building the right message?
I love combining both. So when you run the cold email sequence, you first of all you want to make sure there is the correct observation about the person, but also in the PS line you can name drop a couple of similar companies you work with.
Mm-hmm.
So you can create, let's say, a subtle FOMO.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, okay, I see that my competitors or similar companies are already using this product. This creates this, like I would say, some sort of psychological effect that the person wants to follow the trend.
Mm-hmm.
So you definitely want to combine those two. However, you can always run those, I would say, separately.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you have some really nice case studies and logos, what you can do is you can find the lookalike audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the same sort of people or same sort of companies which are similar to your customer. I'm sure you're doing quite similar things as well.
Yeah. Yes. I think lookalikes are very good, in particular in the spaces where it's very hard to identify ICP. So, for example, you're in crypto space or gambling, whatever multiple spaces there are, where it's very difficult using current data structures and different database, whatever, to find the right potential net new customers. So lookalikes work really well.
Yeah.
On that front, actually, we'll be also launching at some point soon also contact lookalikes.
Right.
If I want to find more clips essentially out there, in the world, and then I'll just gotta enter your LinkedIn URL, and we're gonna go and find more similar people to you. So that I think is awesome. Just another way of targeting generally. But like my favorite actually targeting today is we use signals, we use many different things, but like what's really close to my heart is when you have a lot of competitors, like hundreds of competitors like I do, is to target the followers or people that essentially leave reviews of followers of my competitors, let's say on LinkedIn. So that's something that we provide. But essentially, so I have the followers list. Actually, in the followers list on LinkedIn, a lot of people maybe have applied for a job. So you need to clean that list and really find the ICPs. And you'll realize that, let's say my competitor is Outreach. And so I would extract all the followers of Outreach, and then I would search for the salespeople or founders, etc. And then you can simply pose a question whether they do any form of outbound. Like I don't have to mention that, I saw that you're following Outreach. I mean, you could say that, hey, I saw that you're following Outreach because I saw that, that piece of data in LeadsForge. So yes, that can make them curious to actually buy my data. But typically I would not say that. I would just say, hey, I was just wondering whether you do any outreach right now. And the assumption is yes, because they are following Outreach. My take is if you're following Outreach, you are potentially a customer, etc. And then you want to do that essentially with competitors where you're typically winning deals, right? So you have probably closed won data and you're saying, okay, and against these competitors, we're always winning because our product is better, faster, cheaper, whatever that is.
For sure.
Right. So this is one of my sort of really favorite lists. So maybe let's transition over to something that probably people are always curious about, which is like, what are your top banger campaigns, what I call, what are your campaigns that you're really proud of? Like, do you have like, maybe 1, 2, 3 examples that you maybe can mention that these campaigns were mind blowing in terms of their performance or what you did, etc.?
Yes, I can mention at least one which I'm really proud of.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this client who sells tennis hardware.
Mm-hmm.
So basically it's a system which allows you to see like your performance. It does line calling, pretty good. I believe they're actually also here in Vilnius and Riga. So they're expanding pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the approach was stupidly simple. But the way of scraping the leads was interesting. So we were using a tool called Serper to scrape the local tennis academies, tennis clubs. And then the message was just like, hey, I saw that you have a really nice facility at the city. And we saw that you have, if we can find this data, like, for example, 10 courts. And then it was like a simple pitch of like what the product is. And would you be like interested in having a chat? Simple as that. So we haven't used like too much of the research. We just found the amount of courts they have. Sometimes we can see if they offer tennis coaching or if they host tennis tournaments, because this is something this system also helps with. And we combined multi-channel, like we used multi-channel approach for this particular client. So emails went off. We got, for example, 10 to 15% reply rate. That's what we get on average on info@tenniscourt.com emails, because it's almost impossible to find personal emails for those people. And then we do a layer of LinkedIn messaging. You would be surprised how many tennis club presidents are on LinkedIn. And then we've done also cold calling rounds. We have 2 amazing international cold callers, and the results were really incredible. We had a call with this client on Friday, and we reported, I believe, 24 booked meetings in February. So nice. This is something I'm really proud of, because you can think that it's pretty hard to find this audience, but if you are slightly more creative with your approach, you can definitely squeeze out so many potential deals.
Gotcha. All right. Next question that I want to ask you really specifically around the 3 channels, right? Yeah. So the email channel, the LinkedIn channel, and the cold calling channel, right? So because you're dabbling in all the 3 channels. What would you say is your top tip for each and one of them?
Okay, specifically for this client, or?
No, any top tip for cold email, and then top tip for LinkedIn that you see works really well, and top tip for cold calling.
Okay, if we start with cold email, this is the most straightforward channel. So what I would say, don't be afraid to pitch, but make sure your offer is really good. So what we were discussing. Use the Hormozis equation. Try to think what sort of value you can provide. It's not necessarily a free trial, but some sort of, let's say, a part of your service which you could just give away for free would be nice. For LinkedIn, I would say the first message, at least for us, should mostly never be a pitch. I would say LinkedIn is more about starting the conversation. So think about a 2-liner message where you can say, hey, make the observation, and then just ask a question which would be relevant. For example, something that we do for ourselves right now is we scraped SaaS founders in Europe, which are not from Scandinavia. And super simple question like, hey, I saw that you're running this company and you work with this ICP. Do a lot of those customers actually come from Scandinavia? So in the first message, we don't even pitch the people. But this is a great way to start the conversation, because why would you not answer to this? Like, it's just a normal human-like question. And then if they don't reply, then we can send them the follow-up and say, yeah, actually, I was asking you because we might be able to help you with like client acquisition in Scandinavia, but I'm not sure if it's something you would be interested in though. So don't be, I would say, first message on LinkedIn, try not to pitch and try to make it sound as non-needy as possible. Because if you just go straight into the pitch, quite often people will be, I would say, hurt, and it can also hurt your reputation. And for the cold calling part, I'm not like the biggest expert in the cold calling, but one tip which helped me a lot, it's not even related to pitch or your tonality, but when you do cold calling, try to do it when you are standing up and you're actually walking. I don't know which sort of psychological effect it has, but quite often you can see that you breathe much deeper and your energy just like much higher.
You can hear it on the other end, I would say. The other thing that I just give it like a little tip, because there's a lot of frameworks and whatever in the space. Just, if you're calling a person, let's say in Italy, instead of greeting them, hey, Giulio, you will greet them, ciao, Giulio, how's it going? Right? So you just greet them in the native mother tongue. And that's exactly what you can also do on email and LinkedIn. Just have that snippet where you just simply greet them by in the native mother tongue. And you can do that programmatically or also do it manually, whatever, right? But that's just a little tip, because it's like a little pattern trap, right? Because you typically greet that if you speak in English, you greet like, hey, John, but instead you're ciao or hello or whatever, or good day, mate, so, if you're in Australia. So
definitely, that's a good tip.
So let's dive into sort of something which is also super important, because when I speak to a lot of folks out there, and one of the things that they really struggle with is the other assets that they need to have as a business. So think about, you may send the best cold email, the best cold call, etc. But once they open your website, once they open your social media presence, channels like LinkedIn, etc., it doesn't build credibility, right? It doesn't look good. So how do you think about sort of these assets, and how do you think about also the concept was called inbound led outbound, meaning warming up your audience prior to actually doing the outreach?
Yeah, I love this concept, and this is something we prompt our clients to do.
Mm-hmm.
So at least, let's say, if the company has a couple of co-founders, which is for the majority of companies, we ask them to post some sort of like thought leadership content at least.
Mm-hmm.
If they can pump out like 2 to 3 posts per week each.
And that's something that you do, guys, for them?
We don't necessarily do it, but at least we give some sort of ideas on in which directions they can go.
Mm-hmm.
And surprisingly, some of our clients are already doing this, and this helps us a lot with selling their service or their offer.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, there are like a lot of ways where you can automate content creation, or at least you can have so many ideas on like what you can post about by just leveraging the LLMs, doing the deep research. You can easily get 50 topics. If you divide it by 3, you have, let's say, 20 posts or like something like this, basically ready. Also, what is important is on the website, what we also ask our clients to do is, again, is there a way you could give away the value? Meaning, if you can have some sort of lead magnet on your website where people can sort of touch your product in a way or have a better understanding of what you guys are doing. This is also a great way how you can convert more people. So for example, one of our clients, it's a marketing SaaS platform.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what they have built now is the calculator, which shows how much you can save on, let's say, or how much wasted budget you can save by leveraging their platform.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something you definitely need to do. So on your website, incorporate lead magnets. Make sure you grab their at least email in exchange for the lead magnet. And also on LinkedIn, try to be active.
Yep.
Even for the sales reps, for the accounts we use for LinkedIn outreach, we ask them prior to starting the outreach, create and actually publish at least 3 to 5 posts. So we create some sort of visibility on who you are.
I know some companies really understand the value of social selling and why you need to be present.
Yeah.
And I know in some companies, they even pay employees like, I don't know, $20 per post,
Yeah.
or whatever that is, just to kind of push people to post, because the company understands that it's super valuable that every person in the company posts. It doesn't have to be about the product. It's just about what you do in your daily life, even just like anything that drive the engagement, but naturally you just hooked up to the company profile, right? So I don't always talk about Salesforge, on LinkedIn or whatever. I talk about, the daily struggles as a founder, or like something, that I'm annoyed about, but it has nothing to do with my company, right?
Yeah.
But you definitely want to be essentially dominating the feeds of your ICPs. So you want to be reaching out to your ICPs consistently, right? So building up the network, and then feeding them or dominating their feeds with really good content. So how to do good content is huge part of our business. But yeah, one of the things where I want to kind of maybe go into right from inbound and outbound is another concept which is super important on, and again, people like Alex Morosi talk about as etc., which is scale trumps luck.
Yeah.
The fact that if you have a certain scale, and when you think about scale, typically a lot of founders, we need to do X number of messages per day, X number of phone calls, but typically you realize it's somewhere between 10x to 100x.
Yeah.
So this is what truly is called scale will trump the luck. So you will ultimately get lucky because you have so much scale and so much firepower when it comes to go to market. Now, walk me through, when you talk to different customers, when you know the scale is important, how do you think about scale, considering the fact that a lot of people are thinking that this is spam, but actually you need to explain the looking naturally probably backwards, sort of maths, right? How many emails or whatever, LinkedIn messages, what calls we need to do to actually book a meeting. How do you think about this with your customers?
I would say it's a simple math, and quite often it's also the industry averages, which is important. For example, some of the clients we work with, they have like a SaaS product for e-commerce brands, and they're targeting specifically CMOs, which is honestly a nightmare, because those people are getting so many messages across. Like I know some GTM agencies which don't work with like e-com SaaS at all, because it's just like too difficult. It's like too saturated. And basically how we try to approach it is we try to explain that, okay, our like average results, let's say we get one positive response per 100 to 150 emails sent. But that's like for the good industry. If we think about your industry, it's much harder to produce results for, and that's completely normal. But what you have to understand is that we need to get you much more volume across to get similar results as we get for other clients. So you either accept the math and you understand that we need more infrastructure, more leads, more different offers to run. Or just like never start this project at all. So you have to accept the truth, basically.
I'll give an example. So in my case, I've got like 500 email accounts, about 250 domains, and about 30 right now, 6 LinkedIn profiles out of 40 plus employees that we have for now.
Yeah.
Up until the end of the year, we're going to have 100 employees in our business, and we're going to have about literally 100 LinkedIn profiles under our operation. So we look at this as a bit more of an advertising, because there's different goals that you can achieve with LinkedIn, right? So you don't necessarily have to pitch for demo. What we sometimes do is we simply invite people into our webinar. We have a huge, what we call outbound led inbound, essentially, because we are reaching out to people to join the webinar. And then that webinar, so for example, today, later on, I have a webinar with a guy named Oleg. He runs a company called Extrovert, and we're going to talk about how to strategically comment on people's posts today.
Amazing.
And guess what? We have like 750 people sign up to the webinar, but at least half of them came from the outbound motion. So we're driving people into the webinar, we're raising awareness. So we're doing these webinars every couple of weeks, right? To be always on the radar. But we need that large infrastructure on the LinkedIn front in particular to invite people into the webinar, because it is valuable, but you need to find ways of how to get people into that, what we call mid-funnel sort of activity, doing a webinar, right? So all right, next thing I want to really ask you, because it's always top of mind for a lot of folks in the US or in Europe, etc. When you have global markets, and we also have Asia Pacific, China, whatever you name it, how do you think about the different geographies and how to approach the different geographies? Because my take is, in China, the only thing that works is WeChat. In Middle East, the only thing that works is WhatsApp. Same maybe with Latin America. In the US, I'm not really sure what works, right? So because I have to test different channels. How do you think about different geographies when it comes to talking to global customers? Maybe let's focus for now, like US versus Europe, or like any insights that you have on that.
Good question. And the answer, I would say, is also like in analyzing the backgrounds like of the markets. For example, as you said, in China, only WeChat works. In some, let's say, countries, like for example, Finland, cold calling works the best. So you don't even have to bother yourself with sending cold emails, because you can just call the person, and with the right data, you have like 90% chance of them picking up the phone. So basically, the approach changes dependent on the country or region. I wouldn't say that people are so different in different continents, because we're all work on the same psychological principles. And if you apply them correctly, you can get an Finnish person, Spanish person, person from the US, Japanese on the call. If you just know how to leverage the let's say, psychology in the right way and the core principles. However, there are some things which are different in different countries. For example, channels, as I said, some countries prefer X channel over Y channel, so you need to adjust. And also in some countries, for example, people are more business thinking, like in the US. So the pitch is more welcomed there than, for example, I don't know, in Germany or any other country.
Yeah, I mean, cold emails in Germany or Denmark, is something that's perceived as banned in those countries.
Yeah.
Germany is one of the worst countries in the world to be sending emails in. Specifically, the fact that you're going to get a lot of, legal letters, and that actually should go into your CAC, your cost of customer acquisition. You have to consider the fact you're going to be spending tens of thousands of dollars just on fines and that's how just things are being done in Germany. But Germany is like a very particular market. I think what I've seen in maybe US, yes, you have to be direct and as much as you can, even on a call. So you don't say it's like, oh, can I speak to John, please? No, you say John, please. Like if you're speaking to a gatekeeper, or like you have to be like very sharp to this on the spot, like in terms of like what is it that you're calling about? What problem can you solve for me?
Yeah.
What have you got that can solve my problem? Because these guys get a lot of calls, right? And but they still need their problems to be solved, right? I would typically say, I got 99 problems and pipeline ain't one, but please do call me, please do email me about the problems I have, but don't tell me, Frank, do you need more pipeline? Sure, I do need more pipeline, but it's not one of my top problems, right? So and so conversations are very short. In the US, I typically find like conversations like 1 to 3 minutes, and you have to adjust. Whereas in Europe, or maybe let's take an example like UK as a market, you need to be more chit-chatty. Hey, how are you? How are you doing? And just a lot more conversational, right? There's a lot more chit-chat maybe that happens on the call.
Yeah.
And so you need to adjust. In cold calling, emails, so for example, I find that in the US, emails have to be very short. Typically, I would say like 50 words is like really golden.
Very true.
Whereas in Germany, you could be 100 words, and that's normal to have. Maybe just because the words are also longer, but a lot of people are used to reading longer copy. But there are these nuances that you have to sort of, consider, right? So that's why optimizing per market is super important. And then my other question to you maybe is specifically around something where I think there's a lot of advice on LinkedIn how to do outbound, or just generally on X as well. And so what would you say is the most overrated advice today?
The most overrated advice in regards to outreach.
Yes.
Ooh.
There's so much advice out there, right? So you get fed on LinkedIn all the time with a lot of different
advice.
And
I give advice to people myself.
What's your most overrated advice?
I would say that maybe even that the cold email should be necessarily like X words long. I would say this is really overrated because in different countries or cultures or industries, people are kind of used to different email length. So there is no like the ultimate answer that 50-word email would outperform 100-word email in this industry. So definitely if you're like, this email is like 75 words, we need to somehow cut off 25 words. I wouldn't say this is something you need to do. And then, for example, you would lose the complete, let's say, meaning or context of the email. So probably in regards to like email length, it's not always the truth.
Gotcha. Let's dive into something like tooling, essentially. And one specific question I have for you, because people use a lot of tools, test a lot of tools, and I bet you test a lot of tools. I test a lot of tools. What will be the tools that you did test and you stopped testing? So what makes you stop not testing? What makes you stop using tools? Why do you transition to other tools?
I would say the complexity is number one thing. So if the tool is like not beginner friendly and too hard to understand how to use, I just disregard it completely. And secondly, I would say if I need some features which are not on the platform, which are like super crucial to me, I gotta just move on and find a tool which has the features I'm looking for.
Gotcha. And how do you think about, I guess, cost of the tooling? Like, because some tools cost a lot and less. How do you think about generally for you as being critical part of an agency? How do you think about cost? Because naturally, we all know that there's a bloat of a lot of tools that we could all use, and naturally costs rack up. But you need to run a very efficient business. So how do you think about cost of the tools these days?
The most important thing is that. I prefer tools which have the pricing which is like based on the usage, which is really nice. So when we do like same repeatable things for each client at scale, it doesn't break our bank. So and also there are like tools even in cold email space which are very focused, or at least they have plans specifically for implementation partners or agencies, as we call them. So essentially, if you are able to give me the discount if I bring all of my clients on your platform, and I also spread a good word about your platform to other people, I feel like that's, let's say, mutual benefit. And so if I can get the discount for it, I feel like Yeah, it's fair. It's more than fair.
I mean, actually, there's other things that, if I would be, I'd never actually run an agency. That's why,
Yeah.
I don't want to be, here saying that I know what I'm, all things about agencies. But, if I would be an agency owner, I would think to myself, I have to, acquire customers. I have to do the fulfillment, right? I have to look at my cost base. I have to look at, how much revenue I'm earning, right?
Definitely.
Margin is definitely good, but you want to optimize the business. But the other things that I'm looking at, we're working with anybody really, apart from me paying you money, what else am I getting in return, right? So that's how I look at every partner that I work with, right? So
Makes sense.
whether they randomly, time to time, say something good, or like I get a referral because it came from you. And I can see that because I have this beautiful little thing at the bottom which says, where do you hear about us? And it will say clip or whatever, know. And I will just see that and I appreciate that. So I think when you work with different partners, there's a lot of partners where, value goes back and forth. But then there's some companies like, I don't know, let's say I work with Google Ads, and I give them a lot of money every month, but Google doesn't give me anything in return, right? Because it's a huge corporation, right? So I'd rather work with people where there's mutual value exchange. Yes, somebody has to pay somebody, but there's other things you kind of consider, like true partners, rather than just we have a commercial relationship in place.
Yeah, beyond money.
Yeah, so the final kind of things I just want to touch upon before we wrap is specifically, how do you think about as the future, right? So a couple of things. I want to really kind of get your thoughts on how do you see the future in the next 12 months?
Yeah.
And where does the role of the SDR play? Like, how do you see this evolving?
Regarding the future, the next 12 months, definitely they will be AI agent heavy. Mm-hmm. So I will see more people, even maybe you saw a couple of people, including me, made a post about XAI. And the job posting was head of GTM and AI agents.
Yeah.
So basically, we'll be seeing more people not just orchestrating systems, but orchestrating agents to handle and take care of the systems. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we are entering again into the agentic world where you will orchestrate the AI agent and it will become, let's say, as an extra employee for your company. So you don't have to hire people, but you would rather focus on building the AI agents. That's the first part. And when it comes to the SDRs as the role, what I also see will happen is that, again, it was in 2024, 2025. If you don't leverage AI in your SDR work, you'll be probably replaced by someone who is leveraging AI. So you need to start digging into the different tools, how you can make the, let's say, have the outputs of 5 or 10 people with only you and your laptop. If you're able to do this, I'm sure you'll be super valuable to any company.
Cool. Thanks for being here, Lip. Thanks so much for your insights.
Absolutely.
If anybody's listening till all the end of this podcast, feel free to leave a like, a comment, or if you have any questions for Lip or myself. And if you're watching this on YouTube, also feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much.